दर्पण दृश्यमान नगरी तुल्यन्निजान्तर्गतं पश्यन्नात्मनि मायया बहिरिवोद्भूतं यथा निद्रया यस्साक्षात् कुरुते प्रबोधसमये स्वात्मानमेवाद्वयं तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये बीजस्यान्तरिवाङ्कुरो जगदिदं प्राङ्निर्विकल्पं पुनः मायाकल्पितदेशकालकलना वैचित्रचित्रीकृतं मायावीव विजृम्भयत्यपि महायोगी वयस्वेच्छया तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ। Verse 69. विज्ञानमात्मेति परे आहुः क्षणिकवादिनः यतो विज्ञानमूलत्वं मनसो गम्यते स्फुटम्. So the topic of this Tvam-pada Viveka analysis continues in these verses, which has begun with verse number 22 and will go up to verse number 103. And in this Tvam-pada Viveka, well, Vidyaranya first talks about, he already talked about, in fact, that this Tvam-pada or Tvam-padartha rather, the individual, well, has two components. And one is a Satya Kutasya Chaitanyam and second is a Mithya Abhasa Chaitanyam. And the ignorant person do not know this mixture. So, so the ignorant people basically, they take mixture as the one unit. Like in case of a rope ignorance, if I am ignorant of the rope, I take the snake as an entity, even though it's a mixture of a real rope and mithya snake, right? But still I take it as a one entity, and that's how I say this is snake. So it's a real one entity only. So when there is a rope ignorance, then there is a one entity alone, and in fact there are two components, and one is that Satya Amsha also. And how this is snake, when I say, even as an ignorant person, when I say this, it is very evident that there are two components. And this is part is basically a Satyamsha. It belongs to rope, which is Satyam. But how do you know that this is a Satyamsha and that snake is a Mithyamsha? How do you know? Well, because when you go near to that so-called snake and with a torchlight, and then, well, definitely you know it as a rope. And then you say, this is rope. So, well, this is continuous and this is go with that real rope also. And therefore, this is part. He cannot be negated. This is part cannot be negated. It goes with the snake. It goes with the rope. And therefore, well, which cannot be negated is Satyam. So, yad badhyam tan mithya, yad abadhyam tat Satyam. Which is negated. Badhyam is negated. Which is negated is mithya, which cannot be negated is Satyam. So therefore this is snake. That snake is negated and therefore it is mithya. This is cannot be negated and therefore it is Satyam. And therefore, well, it has a two component. One is a Satyamsha which belongs to rope, and the other Mithyamsha, that is snake. So this is a mixture, but that Ajnani, the ignorant, the person who is ignorant of the rope doesn't know. Well, anyway, so in same way here also in case of Jivatma also, well, I think it is one entity. I am a Jiva, but I am individual. But in reality it is a mixture of two. Well, in here I am, well, that basically belongs to Kutastha Chaitanya. Or I myself, we have taken a little differently. So I myself, etc. The self is Kutastha Chaitanya, and I, he, etc. Well, all this belongs to Mithya Chidabhasa, etc. So Vidyaranya dealt with these two components of Tvam and now later he started talking about this confused people who do not know that these two things are there and they take them as one thing alone. And and ignorance is always one, confusions are many. So this is how it is. Ignorance of the row can lead to a confusion as a snake also, confusion as a streak of water, confusion as a cable, anything. Confusions are many. Even in our day-to-day parlance also it is same thing. Like some particular incident has happened involving one person, right? And if no one is aware of that, and if suppose that person is a public figure, then all the newspaper will make their own stories. So once the ignorance of a particular thing is there, the confusions which arises out of that will be many. And so this is how it is. So Tvam-padartha Ajnanam also leads to varieties of the misconception. And therefore these confusions not only are there with the lay people, but also the philosophers also are confused. And therefore to avoid all confusions, a person who is studying this Vedanta for gaining the clarity of this Atma, etc., he should be exposed to this kind of confusions in order to avoid them, not to adopt them. And so we have started with different philosophers, those who say the self is basically this Annamaya Kosha, the Deha alone, the physical body is Atma. And then the Indriya Atmavada. Somebody says the sense organs are Atma. Somebody says Prana alone is Atma. And somebody says, this mind is Atma. So all they are also confused people, like lay people only, but they have, with the thinking, they have arrived at the wrong knowledge regarding the self. And so, and then now we are entering into Vijnana Atmavada. And so this basically, the Vedantins have two types of approaches to deal with these philosophers. And the first one is the Vedanti takes each philosophy and negate them by basically giving several arguments. Like Vedanti talks directly to this Indriya Atmavada or Deha Atmavada and refutes it. And then he takes to Indriya Atmavada, then he takes to Mana Atmavada, etc. But Prana Atmavada, this is one approach of a Vedantin towards the philosopher, taking each of them and refuting with several arguments. Or else, the second approach is Vedanti will not argue with each one. He will sit in that easy, lazy boy chair, and he allows inside these philosophers, he allows them to discuss. And then you will find that first one, Dehatmavada, is negated by this Indriyatmavada. Indriyatmavadi is negated by this Pranatmavadi. Pranatmavadi is negated by then ultimately, this Manatmavadi. In Manatmavadi is negated by Indriya, this Vijnanatmavadi, etc., etc. And when the final one, who has won this debate, will come to Vedanta, and then Vedanta will refute that. So that is called Prathama Malla Nyaya. So like Kasparov, in Kasparov basically will not play with everyone. Whoever comes in final, he will play with that person and won the title, right? So this is how it is. So Vedanta is like Kasparov. So he basically, he does not does not do arguments with all these philosophers. The philosophers themselves, with the debate, negate each other, and ultimately whoever has won will be dealt by Vedanta. So this is a second approach. Either you deal individually to each one of them, or you deal finally with the person who has entered into the final. So this is that is called Prathama Malla Nyaya. Anyway, so let's talk about this Dehatmavadi. Here the approach is what? This Deha is Atma has been negated by Indriya Atmavadi. How? Well, we said Deha cannot be the Atma because it is non-eternal. We find the body is insentient also, dead body. So Maranam itself, the death is a pramana for a mysterious principle, distinct from the body, who is giving the sentiency to the body, and now that principle has left, and therefore body has become insentient. If body by nature is a sentient, body by nature is a conscious entity, then definitely it can never become insentient, but it becomes insentient at the time of death, and therefore there is a distinct principle which gives this body sentiency, and therefore that mysterious principle which gives sentiency to the body is Atma, and therefore because of that only the body was conscious, and now it has become inert at the time of death, and therefore so Indriya Atmavadi says like this, that Deha is not an Atma and the body is not an Atma, Indriya is Atma. One distinct principle other than body is Atma. And then he says, well, Indriya is Atma. Indriya, which is distinct from this physical body, gives sentiency to the body. That's how he says that. Deha Vyatirikta, Indriya is a Atma. And then, well, Pranatmavadi comes and he says, no. Indriya is not an Atma. Even when the Indriyas are not there, people are able to function. We saw that yesterday, the story of that prana, well, he's the supreme, etc. When even Indriyas are right now, suppose the eyes are not functioning from today. Let's just think of that. So still person is alive. And therefore Indriyas, one by one, even if they go, still person is able to live. And he is alive all. Therefore that distinct principle, which is different from the body, that principle cannot be the Indriya. That Atma cannot be this Indriya, or Indriya is not an Atma. It is different from even these senses. And then, well, the Pranatmavadi is negated by Manatmavadi. And he says, well, I am an experiencer of the world, and I am a Bhokta, and then I is equated with the Bhokta. I means that Atma, well, which is conscious principle, is a Bhokta. And then you are saying Prana is basically Atma, but Prana cannot be Atma, because Prana cannot be Bhokta. Bhokta is Atma, but Prana cannot be the Bhokta, because in deep sleep state, well, there is no Bhoga. And therefore, if Prana is a Bhokta or Atma, then in deep sleep state, all different experiences should take place. Bhoga should happen. What is Bhoga, Swamiji? I have already told you before, also I have defined. Sukha Dukha Sakshatkara Bhoga. So, Sakshatkara, experiences of Sukha and Dukha, pleasure, pain, etc. That is not there in deep sleep state, and therefore Bhokta is not there. And you said in deep sleep state only Prana is there. Everything has resolved, mind and senses and everything has resolved. And well, then definitely, if Prana is a Bhokta or Atma, well, then in deep sleep state, basically, that should continue. The Bhoga should continue, but it is not there. Therefore, Prana is not a Bhokta or Atma. But then, who is Bhokta? Well, in waking, the principle which wakes up and says who is Bhokta, that mind alone is awake, and therefore mind is a Bhokta. When mind resolves, Bhoktrutvam goes. When mind arises, Bhoktrutvam comes. And Bhokta is Atma, because that is my own experience. I am Bhokta, I say. That means Atma is a Bhokta. And therefore, well, and when mind is awake, the Bhoktrutvam comes. Therefore, mind alone is Atma. So this is how he has refuted Pranatmavadi. Pranatmavadi has refuted Indriyatmavadi. Indriyatmavadi has refuted Dehatmavadi. And we are basically sitting in that lazy boy chair and watching this game. Now Vijnana Atmavadi has entered in verse number 69. And from verse 69 to up to verse 73, well, this Vijnanavadi, that's a branch of the Bauddhas actually, and they are called Kshanika Vijnanavadi. So Kshanika Vijnanavadi, and they are also called as a Yogachara. people. And so they have other names, Yogachara and Madhyamika and etc., Vaibhashika, etc. So these are other names of this, the different branches of the Buddhas. They have 4 branches, and one of them is this. Then we will be talking about that other branch also later. So Kshanika Vijnanavadi or Kshanika Vijnanavadi. Now Vidyaranya is talking about this Kshanika Vijnanavada, which will refute this Manatmavadi. He will refute the people who says mind is Atma, and he introduces this principle from verse number 69 to 73. What is Vijnanam? He is going to define, but I will tell you in brief actually. So Vijnanavadi says Vijnanam is Atma. Vijnanam means what? Vijnanam means aham, that I knowledge, basically constantly flowing, right? I. And I knowledge also continues, which is uniform, which is continuous, which is non-changing, that, right? I see a table, I see a book, I see a computer, I see a camera, I see a mobile. That's true, but that I knowledge continues in all these cognitions. And well, therefore, other things come and go, like table and chair and computer and all, they come and go, but that I see this, see this, etc. So I knowledge continues. That's called Vijnana. So very I notion is Vijnana. So in and through, well, I is a common factor, and he calls it as this Vijnanavadi calls this I knowledge as Alaya Vijnanam, which is nothing but this I knowledge. So Vidyaranya says Aham Vrittihi, it is constantly there throughout the day. So I is a basis for even Idam Vritti also. So for other knowledge also to take place. So Aham Vritti is a basis, and because of that Idam Vritti also. And so Idam Vritti means object cognition. It is always based on this Aham Vritti. So when I go to sleep, Aham Vritti resolves, then Idam Vritti also resolves. And so when I wake up, well, Aham Vritti arises, I knowledge arises, and then definitely the cognitions pertaining to object also arises, or object knowledge arises. And so in Upadesha Saram also, where you know, Ramana Maharshi says this Aham Vrittim Ashritaha. So everything is dependent upon this Aham Vritti. All the Idam Vrittis are dependent upon Aham Vrittis. Idam Vrittis are dependent upon Aham Vrittis. So this Aham Vritti, I knowledge, is called Vijnanamaya Kosha. Idam Vritti, object cognitions, is called Manomaya Kosha. So Manomaya Kosha is supported by this Vijnanamaya Kosha. Vijnanamaya Kosha is superior to Vijnanam is superior to Manaha, or Vijnanamaya Kosha is superior to Manomaya Kosha. So he says Vijnanam Atma iti ahuhu. Vijnanam is Atma. This I knowledge which is continuously there is Atma. Not mind is Atma. Because that is dependent upon this Aham Vritti. Manaha means Manomaya Kosha. We have already seen that. So Manomaya Kosha, and that too this all cognitions pertaining to object, they are dependent upon I knowledge, dependent upon Aham Vritti. If Aham Vritti itself is not there, if it resolves, well, Idam Vritti also, object cognition also cannot take place. Therefore Vijnanamaya Kosha is a basis for Manomaya Kosha. So Manasaha Vijnanam. So why do you call Vijnanam Atma? Because Manasaha Vijnanam Mulatvam. He is arguing to this Manatmavadi. He is arguing to the philosopher who was saying that mind alone is Atma, etc. So Manasaha Vijnanam Mulatvam. So mind refers to this Idam Vritti and any knowledge of any object. Well, basically that's Idam Vritti is dependent upon Aham Vritti. So Vijnana Mulatvam means what? Vijnanam means Aham Vrittihi Moolam, Karanam, Yasya Manasaha. So Vijnanamaya Kosha is Moolam, Karanam for Manomaya Kosha. So that Jnanam alone is Atma. Sputam Gamyate, he says. Sputam Gamyate means it is known from our day-to-day experiences that Aham Vritti alone is the basis for Idam Vritti. I knowledge is there all the time. If that is not there, Aham Vritti is not there, then definitely Idam Vritti also cannot take place. Cognitions or object knowledge also cannot take place. And therefore, So Vijnanam Moolam. Vijnanam is a Vijnanamaya Kosha or Vijnanam. Or Aham Vritti is the Karanam for this Manomaya Kosha or mind. So mind is not Atma. That's what he says now. And so and he quotes here as a Parekshanika Vijnanavadinah Ahuhu. Pareksha. So Vijnan Parekshanika Vadinah. This Vijnanavadi is a Kshanik Vijnanavadi. And why Vijnanam is a Karanam for the Manomaya Kosha, etc., he is going to explain in the next verse. We'll see that. Verse number 70. Aham vrittiridam vrittihi ityantah karanam dvida vijnanam syadaham vrittihi idam vrittir mano bhavet. So he is in a process of explaining. Vijnanamaya Kosha is a Karanam for Manomaya Kosha. Aham Vrittihi is a Karanam for Idam Vritti, etc. And definitely we are not able to understand right now, but he is in a process to explain that. So this Vijnanavadi argues here now in verse number 70. See, Vijnanam represents basically I knowledge. And Ahamiti Jnanam is that is called Vijnanamaya Kosha. So it is Ahamiti Jnanam. So Ahamiti Jnanam. So it is basically looks like it is Atma Jnanam alone. But it is not a Kutastha here. It is not a self-knowledge. Just ordinary, right? Even this person who is a Jnani regarding the self, he also has this knowledge. I. And so I knowledge is there even in that person. So that ordinary self-knowledge, not that I am Satchidananda, etc. or I am a Kutastha, etc. Well, that kind of a knowledge is a Vijnanamaya Kosha, and it is a Kshanik Vijnana. And so in this Kshanik Vijnanavada, this aham is a called Alaya Vijnanam, and according to him, this Buddhist, well, Alaya Vijnanam is a continuous flow. I told you. So it is constantly flowing. I consciousness continuously flow. Manomaya refers to Idam Jnanam, consisting of second person and third person. And I is a first person. So this knowledge, the knowledge pertaining to the objects, well, can be in a second person or a third person. Suppose the world is in front. Then, well, the first person means this I knowledge, Aham Vritti. So first person is all the time there. But the second person or third person, well, depends upon the world. Suppose you are there in front. Well, I will use second person. But object is there. Then, well, suppose you are not there in front. Or you are there in New Jersey, suppose. Then I cannot use you. So then I will use third person to refer you. He or she, like that, right? So when you are in front, I will say you. I will use second person. When you are not in front and somewhere else, well, I will use third person for you, he or she. And even in front, the object is not a sentient being. Then, well, I can use the third person. So second person or a third person. Whether the object is in front or object is not in front, or the world is in front or world is not in front, whatever. So, they come and go like that. But this Aham Vritti continues. So, well, basically Aham Vritti refers to only one entity. Idam Vritti refers to Jada Chetanam, sentient, insentient, infinite things. So here Yogachara says Aham Vritti is this Vijnanamaya, Idam Vritti is this Manomaya. You see in this shloka he says Antakaranam Dvida. Same Antakaranam. Because you are going to ask me, Swamiji, Aham Vritti you are saying. So that is a part of the mind. Yeah, it is a part of the mind. Idam Vritti, that is also part of the mind. So he says Antakaranam Dvida. So Vritti has two components. Aham Vritti is one and Idam Vritti is another. Aham Vritti and Idam Vritti. The Vritti here, let's take it as knowledge. Knowledge pertaining to the I, first person, and knowledge pertaining to the world. So in Vedanta we say Kartru Amsha and Karanamsha. So ahamvritti kartrumsha. So ahamvritti, the very I knowledge is called kartrumsha, and idamvritti is called karanamsha. In Vedanta we say like that. So ahamvritti is one and idamvrittis are many, right? Ahamvritti is one. I see a book, I hear this music, I listen to the music, I touch this, or so several. But ahamvritti is one ever in all cognitions. But in idamvrittis are many. And without this ahamvritti, without this first person, there cannot be second person or a third person. Therefore, and ahamvritti is a karanam, and for a second person, third person vritti, we can say, or idamvritti. Ahamvritti is a moolam, karanam for the idamvritti. So what is moolam is ahamvritti. Idamvritti is karyam. So vijnanamaya is a karanam and manomaya is a karyam. It is maybe right now you may feel it is too much, but he is going to explain it. And so he says vijnanam syat ahamvrittihi. Ahamvrittihi vijnanam syat. Ahamvritti is this vijnanamaya kosha or vijnanam, and idamvrittihi mano bhavet. He said antakaranam dvida. He has divided this vritti into two components, or the mind into two components. And in that one is ahamvritti, which is one alone, and idamvritti, which are many. So idamvrittihi mano bhavet. Idamvritti is called manaha or manomaya kosha, and vijnanam syat ahamvrittihi. Ahamvritti, I cognition, I consciousness, I knowledge, is vijnanam. Still he has not said a relationship of a karya karana between them. Now he will explain in the next verse. Verse 71. Aham pratyaya bijatvam idam vrutteriti sfutam aviditva swamatmanam bahyam vettinu natu kvachit. So now here in this verse he is introducing this karya-karana relationship between vijnanam and manaha, or vijnanamaya kosha and manomaya kosha. Between ahamvritti and idamvritti there is a karya-karya relationship he is telling here. What he says, idamvrittehe aham pratyaya bijatvam. So bijat, what was said earlier as a moolam, right? He said in the he said in that verse Vijnana Moolatvam, I think in verse number 69, you see that Yataha Vijnana Moolatvam Manasaha. Manasaha Vijnana Moolatvam. So Moolam means a karana. So Manasaha Vijnana Moolatvam. So the Vijnanam is a karanam for the Manasaha, means of the mind, means of Manomaya. So he says Idam Vruttehe, here he instead of a Moolatvam he says Bijatvam, seed, means karana. So idam vruttehe aham pratyaya bijatvam. What was said as a moolam before in verse number 69, he calls it here aham pratyaya bijatvam. Vijnana moolatvam is equal to aham pratyaya bijatvam. Means what? Aham pratyaya bijam yasyaha sa aham pratyaya bijam. And tasyaha bhavaha aham pratyaya bijatvam. Aham pratyaya is a bija, is a seed, is a cause for some vritti. Which vritti? Idam vritti. And so this is aham pratyaya bijatvam is a cause for idam vrittehe. Idam vrittehe, sixth case. So aham pratyaya bijatvam vidam vrittehe. Idam vritte means of this idam vritti, of this mind, of this manomaya kosha, aham pratyaya, or that is vijnanamaya, or that I knowledge, is, or aham vritti. Aham pratyaya is equal to aham vritti, is a cause. It is futam, it is clear. So Vidyaranya looks at the students, right? Because definitely when all the students have raised their eyebrows, how can you say like that? We have never heard that Vijnanamaya is a cause of this Manomaya, etc. So he explains. Tam atmanam aviditva, in second line, without being aware of first this I am, where is a question of talking you are or he, she, is. Okay? Without being aware of the fact I am, you cannot talk about the second person called you are, or the third person called he, she, his, etc. So when if I am, that particular thought itself is not there, other two will not be there at all. And therefore, in absence of karanam, karyam cannot be there. If aham vritti is there, then only this second person, third person comes. You are or he, she, is, etc. comes. Means what? Definitely this aham vritti is a karanam. In absence of the karanam, karyam cannot be there. And therefore, this is how he explains. So tam atmanam aviditva. Atmanam is here, this our general, this I knowledge. Without this I knowledge, without this aham vritti, aviditva, if you are not aware of that, means it is not there. Because aham vritti arises, you are automatically aware of this aham vritti, being conscious, right? And therefore, without this I consciousness, well, there cannot be the second or third person consciousness or knowledge. So, bahyam kvachit navetti, well, in absence of that aham vritti, knowledge, there cannot be bahyam, which is in terms of an idam vritti, kvachit navetti, well, nobody will know. It won't be there, nobody will know it also. This is a very favorite topic of Ramana Maharshi. So he says all the problems you can talk about when there is aham vritti. So inquire into that, I, instead of solving the problem outside. So ahamayam kuto bhavati chinvatah aipatatyaham nija vicharanam in Upadesharam. So ahamayam kuto bhavati chinvatah aipatatyaham nija vicharanam. Nija vicharanam is atma vicharanam. When you analyze the atma, well, this very notion, I notion also drops. So basically ahankara also will fall off. This is in our language, not for a Vijnanavadi, but in our language. So ahankara will fall off in 2 minutes of inquiry, because what is left out is a sakshi. On this ahankara, the aham vritti also is standing on this sakshi. Anyway, so this, but if I thought is not there, if aham vritti is not there, there is no question of you are or he, she is, and therefore idam vritti, which we call as a manomaya kosha, is totally depend upon this aham vritti or vijnanam, and therefore vijnanam is a karanam for this. So this second person, third person's existence itself will not be there in absence of the first person. And therefore first person definitely provides an existence to this. Therefore aham pratyaya is I notion or vijnanam, I knowledge, I consciousness is basically the cause of idam vritti or manomaya. And you will find this, Ramana Maharshi's this favorite topic, this I knowledge, etc. or aham vritti, well, in Saddarshanam also, in Upadeshasaram also. Aham inquiry. Inquiry into aham is the favorite topic of Ramana Maharshi. Anyway, so here of course we are talking in terms of this Vijnanavadi. Vijnanavadi says this I consciousness is a continuous thing, non-changing thing. It is there in all these cognitions. Idam vritti, well, keeps on changing. They are many. Aham vritti is one. And that is the cause of manomaya, mana or idam vritti. Verse 72. Kshane kshane janmanashau aham vrittermitau yatah vijnanam kshanikam tena saprakasham svatomite. So this Vijnanavadi, otherwise called Yogachara, etc., they said this much, that Vijnanam is Karanam of Manomaya. Whether it is Nityam or Anityam, well, Vidyaranya did not mention till. We say like that it's a change, it's a non-changing, it is continuous, etc. But Vidyaranya did not mention all these things. And we said from our side that very aham vritti also, which is ahankara, is kshanikam only. Why? It is chidabhasa. This is from our standpoint. So Vijnanavadi, well, from his standpoint, it is not kshanikam. And even he is going to kshanikam, we have to understand what it is. From our standpoint, this is a kshanik Vijnanavada. So he now in this verse, Vidyaranya introduces this kshanikatvam of vijnanam. He introduces here now. So the nature of this consciousness, I consciousness, is kshanikam only. So otherwise, this vijnanam, this I consciousness, if you don't call it kshanikam, then Vedanta and this kshanik vijnani will be one. And therefore, the difference between Vedantin and this Yogachara people, kshanik vijnani people or vijnanavadi people, the difference is this much. Vijnanam is kshanikam, the very I vritti, aham vritti, I consciousness is kshanikam, is temporary, is momentary, is told by these people. And we say no. What you say momentary is something else, actually. And the very Sakshi is not a momentary, it is Nityam, etc. And so that's a different. Vijnanam is Atma and Vijnanam is Satyam. Everything else is Mithya. And all this is basically is same. But the difference here is, Vijnanam is Kshanikam in a Buddhist philosophy, where Vijnanam is Nityam, that is Atma, consciousness is Nityam, is Vedanti. So sometimes the people who do not understand this, they consider Vedantis as a Prachanna Bauddha. Prachannam means a hidden. So they outwardly, he says he is a Vedantin, but he really in his core, definitely this Vedanta is nothing but a Bauddha alone, because they also say the Vijnanam is Atma, and Bauddhas also say Vijnanam is Atma. But the difference is they call Vijnanam is a Kshanikam and we call Vijnanam is a Nityam. So that's a different. So Vijnanam is momentary, we say it is not momentary. What you say momentary, and there also consciousness is there, but that is not really the Atma. That is something else. We will be discussing that. So Vijnanavadi says Vijnanam is momentary, Vedantin says consciousness is eternal. And so Anitya Vijnanavadi we can say. In short, Anitya Vijnanavadi is this Yogachara or Bauddha. Nitya Vijnanavadi is Vedanti. This is how it is. So, but why does he say this consciousness is momentary? See, when he talks about a consciousness, he has recognized that consciousness which is reflected in this momentary thought, Abhasa Chaitanyam, right? We are trying to understand his standpoint. Why he called this consciousness as momentary? So that is the reason. He only knows this consciousness which occurs in a thought, not even in the mind. Please understand. Consciousness which occurs in a thought, and that thought is constantly moving, violently moving, and so the consciousness reflected in that thought also will be constantly moving. It is kshanika, momentary. And the reflected consciousness, in reflecting medium of a thought, he mistook it as a consciousness, which is consciousness, but that is a reflected consciousness, he doesn't know. We say reflected consciousness, reflected in thought. He doesn't think that. He said that's a reality. The consciousness which arises in every thought is the reality. It is not reflection, etc. It is not a reflected consciousness. It is not Chidabhasa. So that is reflection that we say. And definitely reflection presupposes the original. And that Sakshi alone is the which is not momentary, which is Nityam, which is eternal. That is Atma we are saying. He doesn't know that. He understands that definitely whatever occurs in that thought, in every thought, and that definitely thoughts are violently moving, they are momentary, and so consciousness arising in that thought also is momentary. So that for them, the Vijnanam or that I consciousness which occurs in every thought, that definitely, because Aham also is a vritti. So I thought which is arising constantly and the consciousness occurring in that thought is that they call it as a Vijnana, is kshanikam for them. So basically, as thought comes and goes, that consciousness also, which is reflected, of course, also that Chidabhasa comes and goes. Like you can imagine, you imagine a series of small mirrors which is coming in front of the sunlight, and and then definitely and it is there, all the mirrors are moving, let's say that, and every mirror it comes in the front of the sunlight, gets sunlight or the sun gets reflected into it, and it just gets reflected into it, but then by the time the mirror moves, and therefore the reflection also goes. But basically when you look at the mirror only, then you feel that the sun is basically momentary, because sunlight or the sun gets reflected for a moment in that mirror. Then since it is moving, and therefore, well, then that reflected sunlight for us, well, it is not, it goes away. So you feel that the sun basically is momentary when you look at these mirrors. But if you think that that is reflection, then you will find that the original one, which is not momentary. Original sun, well, it is all the time there. But if you look at, if you equate the sun which is appearing in the mirror as the reality, then you feel the sun is, or the sunlight is momentary. So that is how it is. Same way, so here also, this anitya vrittistha pratibimbita chaitanyam, the vritti which is anityam, which is constantly arising, and consciousness which is reflected in that, well, if you take that as a reality, then you will feel the consciousness is kshanikam. So aham vritte, for this aham vritti, I thought, janmanashau, there is a constant birth and death, right? Therefore, like I see, suppose if I say I see, then well, I thought is there as a seer. When I say I hear, so I thought is there with respect to hearing, etc. And so each I has a different qualification. Seer I comes and then goes away, hearer I comes and goes away, and that way when like if I think of my son, then father I appears and then goes away. So like that, basically the I thought arising are definitely several, and they are all momentary, and then consciousness reflected in that also will appear as a momentary, and that's how. But you don't know it is a reflection. I mean, the Buddhas do not know, and therefore they take that momentary consciousness alone as a atma. So vijnanam kshanika vijnanam. So vijnanam means I thought, that is kshanika. That's how they are called kshanika vijnani, who says that consciousness or atma which appears in this thought, they won't say like that. They say consciousness alone is, which is in form of this aham vritti, that is the reality, and that is kshanika. They don't know that it is a reflection, and that there is a witness, there is a sakshi chaitanyam, which is original, which is there in its moolam. So that is not there. So that is how very aham vritti. That's how Ramana Maharshi says that don't try to solve the problem outside. Just think that this idam vritti is a mithya actually. That is karyam, that is mithya, and aham vritti is a karanam for that. But the very aham vritti also is a mithya actually. Ahankara is a mithya, and the sakshi is the reality of it. So that is how he always focuses on this aham vritti. Anyway, so this is varieties of the I thought arises, and accordingly kshanika vijnanam also. Vijnanam also is a kshanika. So he says here mitau. Mitau means we are experiencing aham vritte janmanashau mitau. So for this aham vritti, we experience a constant birth and death, or mitau, ma dhatu is there. Ma means to measure or to know. That's how pramanam word has come from that. Manam, pramanam, etc. So here, know. Mitau means know. So janmanashau mitau. So birth and death of what? Of aham vritti. So it says aham vrittehe janmanashau. So of this I thought, well, we experience, we know what? Janma and nasha, the birth and death. And kshane kshane, every moment they come and go. So aham vritti arises and goes away. Aham vritti arises and goes away. That is, and consciousness, of course, in that aham vritti also it will be momentary. That consciousness is basically, which is kshanikam, is atma, not the mind, not this idam vritti. Who says, Vijnanavadi tells to this Mana Atmavadi, who says mind is Atma, well, he says no. Vijnanam is Atma. Vijnanam is a cause, and Mana, mind, Manomaya, etc. is a effect. So, like in a river Ganga also, we have to understand this Kshanika Vijnanam. So, momentary consciousness is there. So, when it's a momentary means which is arising in the thought, aham vritti. That is Atma. But actually, you have to, what he says, Kshanika Vijnanam, we have to understand. Say, like I give you example of a river Ganga. So you will say, well, it is continuous, right? But basically, it is not a continuously present. Every moment a new water arises, right? I mean, new water comes wherever you are in a particular point. A new water comes. So, like when you take it 3 deeps in that Ganges. In first deep, you say, I am taking the deep in that Ganges. But actually, the very first deep is in a water which will not be there in that second deep, which will not be there in that third deep. Every moment, new Ganga will be there for you, really speaking. But you don't say. You say, I took 3 deeps in that Ganges. You don't say that it is continuously changing, etc. And because you are referring to the flow of as a Ganga, the flow of water which is there, you are referring it as a Ganga, and therefore you are not saying that I am taking a deep in the fresh water of a Ganga every moment. The 3 deeps are in a 3 new waters. Well, you don't say that because you take that flow as a Ganga, and therefore no specific, but water you call it as a Ganga. Only flow you take it as a Ganga. Same way, Kshanika Vijnanam means a consciousness arising in that aham vritti, in that particular vritti, is not Atma. He says this, but the flow of this Kshanika Vijnanam, right? Every moment a new thought arises, aham vritti arises. In the consciousness gets reflected. And another aham vritti arises. Consciousness gets reflected. So that flow of that Kshanika Vijnanam is Atma. That's what he says. Don't take just one particular thought. Several thoughts, aham vritti arises, new aham vritti arises every moment. And the consciousness will appear there. So that flow of that Kshanika Vijnana, momentary consciousness, not just momentary consciousness is Atma. The flow of that momentary consciousness is Atma. Like every moment a new water is there of Ganges. But you say Ganges is perennial and it is constantly flowing. So that flow you take it as a Ganges. Even though every moment there is a fresh water at particular point, but you don't take it as a Ganges. You take it the flow as a Ganges. Same way here also. Not that a particular the consciousness appears in that aham vritti. Well, a particular thought, it is not taken as Atma, but the flow of that Kshanika Vijnana is called Atma. So this is what a clarification. So yataha, since this is so, means janmanashau mitau aham vrittehe janmanashau mitau. Since we see this consciousness appearing every moment and going away, janma and nasha, well, so they are known like that. Because of that reason only, vijnanam kshanikam tata, means because of this reason, vijnanam kshanikam, consciousness is momentary, atma is momentary. So the I consciousness, which he calls it as a alaya vijnanam, is momentary. And then there is a separate sentence. You have to stop here, take the separate sentence, and it says swataha mitehe vijnanam swaprakasham bhavati. Now he adds another important feature of this vijnanam. One feature he has already added, it is kshanikam, momentary. Second feature now he is adding into that. See what he says, this swataha mitehe vijnanam swaprakasham bhavati. When all objects come and go, vijnanam also arrives and goes away, but it is pertaining to the objects. So means you know all the objects through this vijnana, right? Without consciousness you don't know. When you say, I see a book, I see a computer, I see this. So definitely where I thought the consciousness is there, getting reflected, because of that only you will know all this. And therefore objects come and go, and well, and the knowledge of that object also come and go. So that is how, well, the whole world, which is considered as a manomaya, which is considered as a idam vritti, is known through this I consciousness. That is okay. But then, well, we ask them, who knows the arrival of and the departure of the vijnana? Well, you know the objects, you know the idam vritti, you know manaha, you know all the objects pertaining to second person, third person is due to this I consciousness. That is all right. But who knows the very arrival and departure of this aham itself? Because you say aham vritti also, that I consciousness also is kshanikam. How do you know that? Idam vritti means all objects you know due to aham vritti. That is all right. But this vijnanam, which knows pot, pen, etc., everything, that's all right. But then how do you know yourself that you are momentary? You arrive and you go away. How do you know? Well, they say it is swasamvedata, swaprakasham bhavati. Well, this momentary consciousness knows itself that it is momentary. So the knower of that momentary consciousness also is momentary consciousness, and it is known as momentary. Also, that is also, the known also is what? Momentary consciousness. It is momentary, that means it's an object of knowledge that I am momentary. Well, that also is known by the momentary consciousness alone. Means the knower also is momentary consciousness, known also is momentary consciousness. That is how they call it swasamvedata. So this is swasamvedata. So consciousness knows itself that it is momentary. Shankaracharya refutes this in Upadesha Sahasri. Very big argument is there. Kshanika Vijnanam knows itself that it is kshanika. So it is capable of functioning as a subject and object. We have never seen that kind of a thing. We don't accept. So swataha mitehe. Miti means this knowledge I told you. Swataha mitehe. So Vijnanam, swataha means one's own knowledge about oneself, that as a momentary is due to himself. So Vijnanam knows itself. It's a knower also and it is known also. This thing we cannot accept it. Anyway, but this is what they say. Saprakasham means Vijnanam is self-effulgent. And so, four things we have seen here totally. Vijnanam is momentary. Vijnanam is first thing is, Vijnanam is I knowledge, I consciousness. Second, Vijnanam is momentary. Third, Vijnanam is self-revealing, so prakasham. And fourth, it is the cause of all knowledge. Cause of idam vritti. It is cause of idam vritti means all objects. It's a cause of all knowledge. It is a cause of manomaya. So he says this is how the kshanika vijnanam is atma. Now let's see verse number 73. Vijnanamaya koshoyam jiva ityagama jaguhu sarva samsara etasya janmanasha sukhadikah. This Vijnanamaya is embodiment of flow of I thought, I consciousness, and this Vijnanamaya is a real I. So, and it is called Jivatma. So it says here, Ayam Vijnanamaya Koshaha Jivaha. This Vijnanamaya Kosha alone is Jiva. And then he says, Iti Agamaha Jaguhu. See, Buddhist says this not only that I say like that, your Upanishad says that. Agamaha means Vedaha. This Veda says this Vijnanamaya alone is this Jiva. Jivatma. And so he quotes Taittiriya Upanishad for that. You know very well, Vijnanamaya Kosha, etc. Very clear discussion of Panchakosha is there. But he picks up that. As such, he does not accept Veda. That is how the Buddhists are Nastikas. They don't accept Veda as a pramana. But for our sake, that's a convenient for him to quote, to take us into his fold. Right? So, well, we will only accept Vijnanamaya is Atma. This Kshanika Vijnanam is Atma we will accept when he will quote Veda. And he will show us that, look at this point. And look at this place. There it is told this Vijnanamaya is Atma. And so Anyantaratma Vijnanamaya, it is very clearly said there, Anyantaratma. Then after Manomaya, Anyaha, Antaraha, Vijnanamaya, Atma. That's clearly Upanishad says. So that's how he quotes. Iti Agamaha Jaguhu. Agamaha Jaguhu means even Vedas declare. Jaguhu means here declare. Even Vedas declared that what I say, what regarding Atma, that is Vijnanamaya. And by Veda means what? Taitara Upanishad Brahmanandvalli. And there it is said this I am Vijnanamaya Koshaha. Atma means Jivatma. And so that kind of a thing is there. But why Jivatma? There is Paramatma. This is Buddhist. Please understand. Then Jivatma, Paramatma, two things are there. And this Atma means that Jivatma. That individual is this Vijnanamaya, Kshani Vijnana. That is the reality. And then there is another Paramatma which is Sakshi and then Brahmana. Nothing. There is no Paramatma. So therefore you may feel that it is alright. Okay. This is Jivatma. That is what we are also saying. That Chidabhasa is Jiva. Reflected consciousness in every thought is basically is a Jiva. That is okay. We also say. And therefore there is another Paramatma and therefore well he will also say that and then we both are one alone. In their language, in their philosophy there is no Paramatma at all. Anyway, so and this Jiva is basically this Atma which is the reality which is Jiva is a victim of samsara. That's what they also say. Etasya sarva samsaraha. All the problems like every Jiva has a Ramayanam and Mahabharata. So many stories to talk about. So, all the problems basically, Sarva Samsara consisting of Janma and Marana and in between this happened and that happened and this is there and that is there. Everyone has a lot of stories. That's called Samsara. So, Etasya Sarva Samsara Jivasya. All that entire Samsara, well, basically belongs to this Jiva. So, Jiva is a victim of this Samsara. But then Janma Marana in between there is a Sukham also. Why you talk about this all Dukkham? But Sukham also has basically potential Dukkham alone. And that's how Yehi Samsparshaja Bhogaha Dukkha Yonaya Evate. And so basically for us even the Sukha also is a samsara. And definitely the pleasure also included in the pain only. I mean samsara only. Etasya means this Kshanika Vijnanasya. Kshanika Vijnanasya has this samsara, which is momentary appearing. They don't know it is a reflection. If means reflection means definitely original. The idea of original will come, which will never undergo any, which will be eternal, definitely. The reflection will be momentary, but they don't think it's a reflection. What appears in that aham vritti, that I consciousness, which is constantly there, and which is the basis for this entire world to perceive, right? Idam vritti. Well, that is the reality, and therefore Atma is kshanika for them, and and the samsara also belongs to it. And then for samsara nivrutti, they have their own philosophy. How samsara nivrutti takes place? For that they have a different philosophy. That's how the philosophers. The darshanas have different. Every darshanam talks about the 6 factors. What is the nature of jiva? What is the nature of Paramatma? If they believe so. If it is not, then they say there is no Paramatma. And then what is bondage? What is what is the freedom? What is moksha? How to free yourself from the bondage? All these things where it has been told, that's called philosophy. That's called darshan. These 6-fold things are there. Jiva Sarupam, Ishwar Sarupam, etc. Bondage, Bandhaha, Mokshaha, all this. And so all this is called in which it has been discussed. This is called philosophy, darshan. So they will have their own philosophy of a samsara nivrutti also. But they say this jiva is a samsara. By nature, he is samsara. And with this Vijnanavadi is over. Now we will have to meet a next person. He is waiting, but we will also have to wait for one more day. And he is going to answer to this Vijnanavadi. And that is his brother only. And that we'll see tomorrow. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.